Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. This is our concepts edition where we go over high-level thinking and concepts. I'm Devin Bedoni of Like & Precision.
And I'm Uriel Eisen of Austere Manufacturing.
And we wanted to send a little shout out to everybody who wrote in. Super cool to see your shops, hear about what you're doing, or not shops. I think most of the folks that wrote in did not work in metalworking, which is cool to hear about y'all and see that there's people all over the world listening to this, which is sort of mind-blowing, but cool.
Yeah, totally.
And yeah, you want to rock the quote?
Yes. There comes a time when we need to decide between what is right and what is easy. From the late, great Dumbledore. From the quote baron himself, Aton, who collects quotes. I find myself this week... Sam is on vacation.
Yep.
And I am trying to keep all the balls from hitting the ground. And
I hope you brought a tennis racket.
No. And there's so many things I want to improve, and it's just like I just don't have the time to do it.
Yeah. Even
though they're small, even though we're here like preaching / enjoying continuous improvement.
Sure.
And I definitely don't enjoy the feeling. Yeah, and coupled with the fact that I'm now doing a lot of things that I haven't done in a while. And so just revisiting those stations, and I think like a fresh pair of eyes / I think a lot about sort of like process and movement and whatever. Mm-hmm. And so it's just like a little bit painful where it's like, oh God, this needs so much improvement. And I've really been thinking a lot about like, I think we incentivize and sort of praise, like, I think about like sort of hustle or kind of just like being a good employee is sort of like shut up and do work.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the opposite. Like so after years of that, it's hard to expect someone to do anything differently, coupled with the fact that I think like personally, I definitely struggle with staying aware, like not becoming used to the current methods. It's just so easy to not rethink things. Like when I was painting and Alicia was watching me paint and writing notes on what I could maybe do better, and he was like, why aren't you spraying paint both directions?
Yeah.
I was like, well, there's no reason, and I've been doing it that way for whatever 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like not to say I'm better, but it's frustrating not having the time to address it, so not being able to kind of do it right, but instead do it easy.
Yeah, it's very hard in the moment, especially.
It feels a little demoralizing to me because like what I really want to do, and normally I just do it, is like stop, fix the problem, keep going. Mm-hmm. And in the long run, that's great. But in the short term right now, like we tend to start getting complaints at 5 days. Like when someone orders and it doesn't ship within 5 days.
Yeah.
Start getting complaints. We've had issues with like our ship station going offline. Today we don't have internet, so we can't ship. Like there's been extenuating circumstances, but it's sort of like, okay, we just need to ship. Doesn't matter how annoyingly placed the printer is. Anyway.
Yeah. I think also like, I sort of feel like right now, I feel like somebody who's like built a car like before cars existed. Mm-hmm. And like you got it to the point where you could like drive down the road and like you invited all your friends to go on a drive and you're like, come check out this sweet thing that I made. And they're like, is this wheel supposed to be falling off? And you're like, no, hold on, let me fix it. And then you stick it back on and you keep driving, like, check out the view. They're like, isn't there the hood? It's supposed to stay down, right? And you're like, yeah, hold on, let me fix it. You know?
Are you saying that with like your internal, like the people who are in the shop?
Yeah. And it just sort of feels like we've gotten this thing to this point where it's like, we can roll down the road. We can cover like core, our core like processes, but it's all like just on the verge of falling apart at any minute.
Yeah.
And I want to believe that we're going to work through all that stuff.
Right.
But yeah, there's some days where you're just like, I know there's a better way, and right now we're just going to bubble gum and tape this back together, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah, and it's really tough to get out of that, I think.
It is, and I think also at this point, sometimes you're like, yes, I know the wheel's falling off. Like, we have to build a factory to make better bolts, kind of a thing.
Right.
Or better nuts or whatever, right? Like, yes, we're not going to solve that today because it's literally like, yeah, the nuts that you can buy on the this is obviously completely made up example, but the nuts that you buy on the shelf.
A great example, real example that we've talked about a lot is the pneumatic vices and the quick change of the jaws.
Yeah.
We've come up with a number of, I suspect, very viable, much better options.
Sure.
But they're all quite a bit of work.
Yeah.
And so we've done nothing about it, even though at some point maybe we will. Yeah. And when we do it, we're going to be like, wow, how did we wait so long? But it's just a big lift.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just experiencing a lot of that right now, I think.
Interesting.
I think fresh eyes has been a part of it in the shop with a new person. We had all, we were working on stuff, but we'd all gotten pretty good at working within sort of the systems that existed and kind of having, tribal knowledge and like, I know that you wrote down that tool, but it actually means this one because you told me last time, that kind of junk. And now we're back to like, okay, actually fix this stuff.
Right.
But it's like everything.
I do know.
It's hard.
Brutal.
It is. Yeah. Speaking of jumping into kind of topics.
Yeah.
And sort of we brought this up, I think last episode or 2 episodes ago. And kind of in regards to Kanban, and now that I'm like contemplating it, it seems silly that I hadn't given it more thought before, but thinking more and more about having our work order slips, which are effectively our Kanban cards, actually move from station to station, because we're just seeing more and more places where there's either things aren't happening due to friction, from having to like walk over to this board in the middle of the shop, to get a sticker or check documentation, or not having clarity about what needs to be done, because as people who do work, we look at the operation and don't necessarily think to go look at this board.
Yeah.
Even though that seems like a simple thing to change.
Right.
I think there's a lot to be gained by having more clarity at each operation itself, more visibility into its status.
So to summarize from the outside, and this might not be exactly right, it seems like what you originally solved with that board and the temptation to put it in one place was sort of like part of the transition from thinking about each job as being very unique to realizing that there was a standard workflow in your shop. And I remember like discussing kind of because you don't have just one workflow, right? It's like, well, sometimes they flow to the lathe and sometimes they flow from the lathe to the mill, or I guess normally lathe to the mill. But, and so like you've sort of developed a value stream map in a funny way, a bit,
I suppose. Yeah.
Right. And like, I feel like that was useful, and I feel like that's probably still useful. So do you have a sense, like, as they move with the parts, it seems like visibility in terms of like which cells are loaded goes away a little, unless you have a hybrid concept?
I think a hybrid concept.
Yeah.
We really just started, I've been kind of chewing on it for the last week, but we really just talked about it for the first time this morning as a group.
Okay.
And I think kind of the hybrid concept right now is that like, so our board as it currently exists is divided into lanes per machine, like which machines they're going to have to go through in the shop. So kind of like which value stream they're going to flow through. So I think there will be places where that's clearly segmented on a board. Like we've ordered material for these jobs and you can kind of move them through.
Right.
So we'll have like a board over by the where the stock comes in. That'll be like,
oh, cool.
This is what has been ordered and we're waiting on it. When stock comes in, you can like pull a tag off of this sheet, put it on the material, and now it moves over to the like, it can be sawn, and that goes at the sawn, still within a lane. And then my thought was then it would go to a setup station where it's still in a lane. So that next board is divided, like these jobs now have all the information that they need to be set up. And then my thought was at that point, we're talking about this kind of like tool, like a setup cart that carries tools, stock, and work holding.
Interesting.
Comes from a central area to each machine.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Will that replace your workstation kind of?
No, I think it's going to be totally independent of that.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I think it will be going back, as soon as it's done, as soon as you've done a setup, it needs to go back to be ready for the next.
Oh, I could see that being really awesome.
I think it's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thought would be that at that point, these work order slips actually go onto the cart. So now you know, like, this is this job. Like, it has all these tools. This is its number. This is how you look it up. And this is where probably QR codes would come into play. So when you bring it over to, at any of the stations, you could scan it.
And have more additional information.
Yeah, versus right now, I think there's a lot of like, okay, you walk over to the board. Okay, what am I working on? Okay, job number 276, part whatever. Then you walk back to wherever station you're at. And you're like, okay, look up job number 276, whatever.
I have a weird idea that's probably not good.
I like weird ideas.
But it makes like some furniture shops I've seen do this where the cart queuing, like there's specified queuing areas.
Yeah.
And so suddenly that becomes, the load becomes visible in where those carts are in the shop, kind of.
Oh, interesting. And the cart moves through the whole process? Yeah.
And so you can kind of see like, oh, we have what's up with all the carts over there? Yeah. That's not right. Or I don't know. Or like there's a queue down in front of the machines that's like ready for setup. And it's like, you should always have one cart as a buffer. Yeah. And if you have none, there's a problem. And if you have like more than 3 and there's sort of a box taped out on the floor with space for 3 and then another box for 4 that's like in red or something. Anyway, I've just seen some stuff around like physical queuing, and those carts feel like you could actually see them in the shop, whereas a small piece of paper in a big shop, you're kind of like, Sure. Yeah. Anyway, might be cool.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think that can evolve, but I think the fundamental concept we're working with is like better access to the information when you need, where you need it, when you need it. Yeah. And then better visibility into where that information has like what state that job's information is at and what state its physical stuff is at in the shop.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There's a window company in Eastern Washington, and they have like 5 or 6 colors in the shop at any given time. You have something similar by week. I think they were doing it by job. Okay. And so you could have like the pink cart and the purple cart and and it would just be like the purple job or something. I don't know.
Yeah. We were thinking about color coding because our machines are color coded. We were thinking about color coding the carts per machine. So like
where they would go to?
Yeah, basically.
That's a cool idea.
Like this lane is defined by this color more or less.
Right. Interesting. Well, that would be cool to play with.
Yeah.
Maybe.
In
your free time.
Trying to figure out, in the free time. Trying to figure out where to start. I think we'll probably start with just like partitioning off portions of it, not trying to like, because it doesn't really need to change all in one fell swoop.
Totally.
And there's probably portions of it that
Are you going to do it incrementally?
Perhaps.
Nice.
There's portions that I think may end up still being on a central board. Because they are literally just like an information step that doesn't correspond to a physical step in the shop.
Right. I'll also say this. I don't really know what it means exactly, but in a lot of lean shop tours, they have 2 functions. One is Kanban, and the other is sort of production planning, which I know you're not meant to production plan, but Toyota does extensively.
Right.
and everyone else does too.
Might be necessary.
But there's sort of a mix. I think the concept is sort of like the issue with not having Kanban. It's analogized to like the nervous system, where if you touch something hot, you're meant to pull your hand away.
Right.
And in a big organization, it's easy to force bad moves on the shop floor.
Yeah.
And then the central planning is kind of like, yeah, how do we get all this work through our existing machines?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think these two can coincide pretty easily.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah. Anyway, that's something I've been chewing on, and
interesting.
Who knows when we'll get to it.
Yeah.
With everything else.
Yeah, so something I've noticed on the topic of Kanban, we switched to this database in Coda.
Yeah.
And we're still mid-switch, I would say. But the prospect of changing Kanban, the friction has been greatly reduced. Like, you used to kind of be like, okay, well, I'm not going to rewrite all those cards.
Yeah.
But, like, currently I'm contemplating, between you and me.
You and me and other people.
Contemplating greatly increasing inventory ahead of our paint department.
Still my heart.
Yeah. And, you know, that's maybe a conversation topic in and of itself, but sort of like the gutter company in the Toyota Way.
Yeah.
Where the recommendation essentially was increase your
Yeah.
inventory because you can level your production that way.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, we have a few very big customers on the horizon. I don't know if they'll land.
Right.
But I don't want to increase our capacity in preparation for that when instead I can just greatly increase our inventory. And then if they are like, let's do it, I can impress them with short lead times.
Mm-hmm.
And then if that becomes sort of like a regular thing, we can
then increase capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it brings, it raises some questions around QC and how to run all that. I was talking to Andrew at Henry Holster's, talking through some concepts of like big inventory quantities, but still flowing part of each batch through to final assembly as a final QC check. Because always the fear is like,
right, you made a
lot of stuff, and the error doesn't show up till final assembly. And so then it's even worse than not having inventory. It's even worse than having rejects. It's the fact that you thought you had inventory and then instead have rejects.
So what is that? I mean, like a simple would be a first in, first out, but then you're not checking till like potentially like a week's delay. So would you do like a multi-lane kind of thing where like 10% goes straight through and 90% goes into buffer?
I think so, something like that. And he had a cool idea of programming the CNC so that as it's running, it's setting like every 5th part aside or every 10th part aside into, so you're getting sampling throughout the batch.
Interesting.
Which is kind of cool. Obviously that leaves you semi-susceptible to like errors that are predictably on part 5, 10, and 15 or something like that. But that feels, anyway, I'm not sure it's necessary, but kind of cool idea. Yeah, but sort of thinking through like how do we manage that and how do we correlate it back, like when it lands on our assembly station, especially with colors that don't sell through as fast, how are we fast tracking it to the head of the queue all the way through and then feeding that information back once it does assemble well, feeding it back to clear that batch and be like, okay, it's past QC.
Because you still need to correlate them,
right? Otherwise it's like, okay, we got rejects, we don't know where they're from or which one of this 1,000 batch of, say we have a few bins of 100 parts, right?
Yeah,
like right now our inventory is around 120 parts, and we'd probably bump it up closer to 1,000 is my thought, or 500 to 1,000 depending on the part. Anyway,
well, there could be, I mean, not to get too into the weeds,
let's get in those weeds,
but I can think of a few ways that could work potentially. One would be not trying to attempt to fast track some of every batch, but say you fast track, like what your batch quantity is, 60, is that right?
Depends on the part.
Okay, but roughly.
Let's say, yeah.
So let's say every 5th batch you flow straight through, and then the other 4 batches go into a first in, first out. That would be like very simple for tracking.
That's true.
That doesn't. Those other 4 batches then have a huge delay if there is an issue in those.
Right.
So that's not ideal. But then the other thought would be, a different thought would be, is if you imagine kind of like a bunch of cars, like on the East Coast where there's like toll stations everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's true.
A bunch of cars come, through on 2 lanes.
Yeah.
And then they split to go through like 20 toll booths.
Uh-huh.
And then sort of rejoin. If you imagine one, like imagine it as like, I don't know, like a bus.
Mm-hmm.
This is getting a little weird now, but imagine a bus comes in as a batch.
Okay.
People get out of the bus. They all go through the toll booths.
Yeah.
The like 5 people that go through toll booth 1 get fast tracked. The other people get regrouped into a batch.
Yeah.
But that batch goes into the first in, first out backup stock.
Yep.
So that you'd still have some traceability. You would have to start.
So we need to know that those
batches.
5 people got off of bus, whatever.
Yeah.
That's the part that I'm kind of.
That is a little tricky.
The other option is to sort of pay a price on QC in the machine. Well, I could do more intense probing and stuff like that. Intermittently.
Wait, backing up one second. If you need to know if you want to correctively partition all of those parts out. But if the only goal is to find the error, you don't necessarily need to know, because it's going to be in that you're going to have parts in this group, like say today, of 60 parts that you assembled that were made yesterday.
Right. So the challenge is a few things. And it's interesting because a lot of them are solved by dropping whip.
Yeah.
Basically, the question is, say we paint, this is really in the weeds. Say we paint like, I'm trying to think of a color, whatever, deep blue doesn't sell as well as like orange, say. And so we have a buffer of 32 deep blue on our assembly station. And now I fast track a batch of deep blue, and it lands on our assembly station. We need to know, A, pull those first. When we get an order for deep blue buckles, pull those first. B, if we want to keep producing that buckle type, but deep blue hasn't been called for by a customer yet, then they're still sitting there. And that's when you get into needing, where we would have multiple batches with multiple expedited portions through the rest of production. Do you know what I'm saying? And so then it's kind of like, okay, this 3/4 body is good. Does that mean the batch of 60 from yesterday is good, or does that mean the batch of 60 from today is good? Yeah. And so that's where it sort of starts to get a little tricky.
It does seem like you need to have some sort of a QC check pre-paint, because you get like a massive splintering of possible tracks after paint.
Right. So we do a lot of QC before paint. Not a lot, but we do a QC before paint. But inevitably, like, I shouldn't say inevitably, we still end up with things that we find at a final assembly. Because like paint adds up in thickness, and so you can have, and we've been like, I have to say, like, it's been fun looking back through some of our rejects, and it's like, yep, we fixed that reject, like we never see that type anymore, and we never see that, cool. Like we have knocked a lot of them out, seemingly permanently, but inevitably we find new ones. Anyway,
that's a knot to untie.
But it really would give us a lot of we could start playing with the big boys, if you will. No, we could start supplying bigger orders without needing a humongous facility. I think like 2 weeks ago or something, I asked the question of like, how do you deal with delivering things fast without just having excess capacity?
Sure.
This is sort of one way. Right? Because we do have excess capacity spread out throughout the year. In fact, we have quite a bit of excess capacity.
Sure. Interesting.
And so this is the real downside of like JIT. Is sort of when someone's like, hey, can we have that tomorrow, and you have to say no.
Yeah.
That's a bummer.
Yeah. It seems like there's obviously potential to get very, very in depth on this problem, kind of backing up to like, what can you test tomorrow, or like what's an acceptable level of risk. You know, you could also say like, we are taking a risk that there is some bad product in this, but we're just gonna partition
100%.
it and continue to run our normal production, and then we'll have 100% like feedback on what we're doing on the day to day. And when we pull this safety stock,
you win some, you lose some.
We're aware that there's some risk in there.
Yeah, I think what I'll start off with is treating it, again, going back to like this thing that I've been getting better at, I think, is not disrupting the way we do things by introducing new ways of doing things, but instead just running them as tests.
Yeah.
Like completely parallel, sort of what you're saying.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of thinking we make big batches of stuff. We do completely different methods of testing. Like maybe I just send some into Paint. I put a specific tag on them. I pull them out. I do a complete assembly test and then a failure mode. You know, I actually break them on our tension. Like, you know, I load them to max and see what happens and make sure, you know, and like I'm putting more labor into it, but it's sort of like the cost of that time versus the cost of hiring more people to deal with a huge spike in
surge
production.
Capacity,
It feels like in the realm of sort of rationalizing production.
Yeah.
Like I don't need that to be the same process, and I don't need it to be as efficient, especially to start. I think.
Yeah. Also, like thinking about how standardized a lot of your stuff is, seemingly.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem crazy to think like I don't know if it would actually be that big of a tracking nightmare necessarily.
Right.
To be like, okay, we take from these bins for the top rows of every Paint thing.
Yeah.
And then the top rows go back into separate bins, and we just literally have, or even the same bin, but with a divider in it. That's like, this side is partitioned for fast tracked work, and this side is pulled from safety stock. And you know, for in the short term, you may not know where the safety stock was made in what batch.
Right.
But at least you know which was which. It's
making me realize something so I wanted to report back on the yellow index cards. Yeah. And this is related. It's been a huge game changer in the shop. Which is funny because it is a laminated index card. And so we've made a lot of updates to tool paths.
Yeah.
We've changed tools, and every time you just go through and make a note on all these yellow pieces, and it's just really easy. And then I've also gotten to a part that has a yellow tag on it. I just read what's on the tag. I watch one part, and I'm like, yep, it's tool 2 I have to be careful of, or tool 1516N number 2.
Yeah.
It's been really, really good, which makes me think that lowering the sort of, I don't know what the word is exactly, just making it easier to track things, even imperfectly, is really useful. Like I could have built a database that tracks all of our programs and it knows what tools are in them and so on and so forth. But actually a yellow piece of paper gets you a long way.
Yeah.
I wonder if I should just order some metal business cards and inscribe like numbers 1 through 20 and leave 2 of each and leave them in a pile. And then you can sort of put one in a batch and take one along, and it could live with the parts in the oven. Just a quick way of being like, that goes to there or something. Yeah. Because how many batches are we going to have? We're in a pretty small shop, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like that would work. Or I bet McMaster has like heat resistant pens or something, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, there's like,
so maybe I wonder if I could write on the parts. That would be so nice.
It probably would mess up your paint, but
almost certainly.
Yeah.
But if they're test parts anyway, maybe I don't care.
Yeah.
Like I just tag them. Like
sure.
Write
I mean,
number 2 on it and put a number 2 in the basket of.
Yeah. In an ideal world, you're not scrapping material just to test this. You really just want to know. You just need to know what's what.
Yeah. That said, we will move in a direction of scrapping more.
To test.
Like 1 in every batch of 100 pulled to max. Doesn't seem crazy to me.
Yeah.
Now it does add cost, so maybe we do a line of.
I was thinking mostly in terms of like time to actually do the testing and stuff.
Yeah, I do like doing the test. You're like, oh man, that is strong.
Yeah,
it's always nice.
Yeah, I mean, information, this is not a hot take by any stretch, but information is so powerful.
Yeah.
Today, or this week, we are running some parts for an internal product that we make.
Oh, cool.
And they sell pretty slowly. So the last time we made them was probably 2 years.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe longer. I don't know. It's been a while.
Interesting.
And we've made a lot of changes since then.
To like the
to
machines
everything.
and what tool is what and all that stuff, or
Yeah, and information tracking specifically.
okay.
And I was like, okay, this isn't going to be a big deal. We've programmed and run these before. And then I was like, oh my God. Like, literally, I couldn't even find the G code. I knew there was good G code. Like, we'd run it prior.
Interesting.
And like, I was doing the like click through files thing, being like, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I made setup sheets at one point when we were doing this, but like could not find it.
And that's because in those 2 years you've moved to like Airtable and so on and so forth, or
that / when I was doing these, I think the last time we made these, I was working by myself and probably was not documenting barely anything.
Gotcha. So going quite a ways back.
Quite a ways back. Yeah. And it was just like incredibly notable that like our systems are not perfect by any stretch right now, but the amount of information that is actually there, even though it's just like whatever weird text files and stuff, is
gets the job done
infinitely more than zero.
Yeah. Right. That's the thing. Yeah.
And having a place where you can always find a thing is
amazing. And for me, those yellow cards, the biggest part for me is not that I can find them, it's that I will come across that information.
Right. It's where you gonna be anyway.
Yeah. And like, I can imagine a world in which I just put a card on there with a QR code that goes to the current file or something, right? And so I just put updates in that file, and then the yellow card means like go check the file and click an unresolved ticket item or something.
Yeah.
I can imagine a hybrid approach, because writing all of them out is annoying.
Yeah.
It would be really nice if it was in Coda and I could just be like, hey, add this tag to all of our current products or all products that whatever. Like there's things I can do. But yeah,
my long-term vision, I think, for these work order slips is that they end up being QR code scannable, so that when you grab it and you're at a workstation, you can just scan it and the relevant information comes up. And it could get to the point where like, this is for the sawing, this is for the setup sheet, like this is for the material type. That's probably more, we'll start with just like getting to the right place.
Yep.
But
do a little scrolling when you're there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can deal with a
that
little
feels
bit of
like
scrolling.
a big step in the right direction.
Yeah. But I think it'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Where do we start on that topic?
All over the place.
Kanban?
Lean, I think.
Lean. Yes, of course. Oh, yeah. Increasing inventory because it's so lean.
Oh, yeah.
That's what we're going to do. Yeah. Anyway, one other thing that we were talking about today. So I feel like there's this fundamental challenge with organizational systems of expansion without breaking.
Yep.
So we're kind of in the midst of a major tooling management overhaul, I guess I should say. Figuring out what are actually standard tools. How do we define what's a standard tool? When does a non-standard tool become a standard tool? How many holders do we actually need? How many do we actually have? Where do you find the tool that needs to go in the holder? All these things.
Right.
How do we get them from the setup station to the machine? Make sure they're the right one. It's like, I'm realizing that this is a very key roadblock in our process right now.
Interesting.
But I was having some discussions with Alec White, a good friend of the pod. And he had this idea, which I think is, at first blush, makes you cringe very bad. But I think it's genius. And it's kind of similar to how we're managing our rotating tool assemblies now.
Okay.
So our current rotating tool assemblies are basically a cutting tool, let's say a 3/8 end mill, a holder, and a stick out. And that has an ID number.
Okay.
The ID number is more or less random.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, like I have them roughly grouped into like indexables, solid carbide end mills, drills, taps, reamers.
Okay.
And basically every time I add a new tool, I just increment to the next number, becomes a new ID, which if you try and...
You can't back derive any information from the ID.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's no embedded... Well, there's one piece of embedded information.
Right.
So similarly, we have been running into this issue where we started out with a very nicely organized tool cabinet with like rows divided into 1/4 inch and 1/8 inch and 3/8 and all of this. And then very predictably, let's say the 1/4 inch ran out of room in the row. And you couldn't add another bin. So then somebody just put 2 tool part numbers in one bin, and now the system's broken because you don't know which one you're looking at.
Yeah.
And when you have tribal knowledge, that's not a big deal because you can find the one that you know is correct.
Totally.
But as soon as someone new comes in, they were like, this is chaos.
They're like, I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This isn't what it says it is. What's this?
And you're like, oh, well, let me tell you.
I happen to be an expert. So Alec's idea was basically that the tooling organization has nothing to do with size or flute count or anything specific to
the physical organization.
The physical organization.
Okay.
And the naming convention has nothing to do with the physical size or anything to do with the end mill. It's just a number.
I assume this is the cringe stage.
This is the cringe stage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, it allows the expandability because basically if you add a new tool, you just add another bin and you increment the number. And as long as your information systems correlate properly,
right,
when someone goes to find number 216, they're all in a row because they incremented as you added them
right
already. And it's very easy to find 216 right after 215 instead of looking for a 3/8 3 flute with a 30 thou corner rad with polished flutes. Which is actually a lot more information to try and like digest and parse and sort as you're looking through a group of things.
Yeah.
So that was a discussion. And then kind of what we came to, which was cool, Aiden came up with this, was actually combining that number with a holder ID. So we're not using a name for the holder anymore.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the combination of the two become a rotating assembly ID. And now you have basically a tool like loose tool storage, holder, rotating assembly storage, and a CAM system that all agree with each other.
Yeah.
So that you can just pull up a number, go find the thing. If it's not there, you find the two things that make this one thing. And I'm pretty excited about it.
That sounds good. The one question I would have, I was just trying to think, like, are there advantages, like what are the scenarios when having things grouped by similar physical attributes would be useful? And it would be something like, I could imagine this happening. I could also imagine designing this out would be like, oh, we're out of this one, or like, oh, we need this. It is not a typical thing. But here's something that will totally work. Which is probably how you started operating, right? It's like, we need something with longer reach. Oh, look, up 3 rows is another 3 flute, 3/8 end mill. That's a little longer. Great, we'll use that. Would you maintain, like, do you maintain sort of that side of things as a separate kind of like aberration that gets a special tag? Right? Because like sometimes it's just like, oh yeah, we can do that. Here, grab this, stick it in that thing. Let's do the 3 holes we need to do.
Yeah. My thinking so far,
or it's just like throw that all out.
My thinking so far is that so we have the like rough designation of like green tags and yellow tags. And we've been thinking of a third sort of designation, which is, we talked a long time ago about like adding a magnet to a green tag if it's been altered. Yeah. It just didn't really happen. It's hard to see. Yeah. This isn't so much different, but I think maybe would be a little bit easier to see would be just having like a secondary yellow ring that like clips onto the green ring so you can tell when it's been altered. Okay. The other alternative, which is maybe simpler, is that if you build up a tool, an ID, in a non-standard configuration, since we're now using yellow tags with whiteboard tape, that you just put it on a yellow tag so that somebody knows. And if we're searching not for green or yellow, but we're searching for numbers, and our idea for our new tool rack is to have everything partitioned by number ranges, that should be relatively, you could still find it easily.
That does sound pretty ideal. And then lastly, I think what I was just saying is sort of irrelevant because you have a CAM library.
Yeah.
So if you wanted a 3 flute end mill, you can search that very easily and see all the tools you have.
Yeah.
And which ones of them are 3 flute, and then you just go look at the number, because that's like, that doesn't matter.
That's true. Right? Also, like, not to lean on this, but like, since we're talking about like edge cases, everybody in the shop has enough fundamental knowledge to know that like these two numbers are different, but I know what a 3 flute
right
3/8 looks like, and this is also a 3 flute 3 flute 3/8.
Yep.
And we can sub right now.
Yeah, totally. I think the issue is just like, how many tools do you have?
Right.
And then if you have a whole row of bins that's 30 feet long,
yeah,
and the 3/8 are randomly interspersed, you're not just like, you can't sort of just play your eye over over the selection you have.
Well, I think it's one of those things where it's like,
but
the role of Kanban is to break your system and show you where your waste is.
Yeah.
Like similarly, like I feel like this is kind of one of those systems where it's like designing around that constraint is silly, when it's like the real thing here is that like you shouldn't run out of the tool. So don't design around like having a good Band-Aid
substitute. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You design around not needing the tool anymore. And you need to figure something out when you run out. But really what this should do is I've been thinking a lot about this lately, about like making things harder so that you can.
Yes. Next episode's quote is very much about this.
We talked about like putting things like purposefully further away from stuff so that it becomes
it's like
more
every time
obvious.
you walk. Yeah. And like last week, I think we mentioned the U-shaped cell.
Yeah.
Makes everything easier, which is problematic because suddenly your wastes are less noticeable.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Could you, and this might just be adding complexity, could you add another number that indicates a location so that things don't need to be like, so the tool ID in CAM doesn't need to map directly to the physical world, like where it is on your shelves? Because that way you could have like aluminum tooling is here. Oh. And that's why it gets the designation of like unit whatever bin 10 or something like that. I could like, I don't know.
Still, I mean, you're still just looking for, you have to look for a number regardless. Yeah. Do you think it's simpler to look for a number amidst a group of aluminum tools versus a number amidst a group of?
It wouldn't be that. It would go back to what I was sort of saying of kind of being able to be like, what M3 taps do we have? And I guess maybe you just do that in CAM and call it a day.
Probably. You mean like before all this?
No, I'm just saying like if I were programming and I was kind of like, how are we going to do this thing?
Oh, yeah.
I guess you could just look through your CAM to know what tools you have available to you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because right now I think I would kind of have a look in a drawer. Oh,
right.
And your proposed system, I think maybe doesn't really allow for that easily.
Yeah, we want to avoid that at all costs.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Programmers looking in drawers, not to say I don't do it, sometimes
is bad.
That's not a useful use of time.
Right.
Yeah. And also a lot of bad things derive from that, I think.
Okay.
Like, I think what you should be doing is potentially looking in a drawer. Well, no, really, you should be looking on like McMaster or MSC or something. Okay. If you need something that doesn't exist in your library.
Right.
And ordering it and making a new, tool ID. There are occasions, obviously, when you're like, okay, does this flute length actually what's real? I'm going to go check. Mm-hmm. But again, I think that's like...
Right. You'd almost rather that not crash a machine, obviously, but the person proving it out is like, this is rubbing or something's not right, and that gets updated for real.
Yeah.
And people know there isn't a safety net, so when you're loading it into the system, you get it right.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah. I think so.
I
don't know. It feels funny because we're like this little tiny shop, and
small shop, big problems.
I feel like, is this really like, this seems complicated, but like it's becoming clear that it's a real stumbling block. And if we're truly going to try and get to a point where like we want to do fast setups and have everything prepped for a job before the prior job ends, this is key because it's taking a lot of people's time.
Yeah. I think this is such a good example of we are, 2 years into our lean life?
Lean journey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think like more and more you move, like the focus on the 15% value add versus the 85% non-value add.
Yeah.
Figuring out what tool you're going to use is non-value add.
Yeah.
And looking through drawers is non-value add. And it's so easy. We were just talking about this before the podcast, like in shop tours, and they show you the huge machine they have there. Yeah. It's like, that's cool. Yeah. But how do you store your materials? How do you, all those things? Because they're tough and they take a huge amount of time, but they sort of fly under the radar because they're not exciting at all.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah. I have a quick topic. No, we don't super need to dig into this. Looking at getting a new machine and what machine to get.
Quick topic.
So I'm between the R450 and the R650.
Yes.
Brother, for those who aren't aware, they're pallet changing machines where it's just like one table or two tables that shuttle back and forth. So it's not like a pallet machine where you can do stuff totally offline.
Not a pallet pool.
No. I want to get one of those two machines over. Okay. There's sort of solving a short-term problem, and there's solving a long-term problem. The short-term problem I have is I need more production capacity, not immediately, but coming up soon, and it makes me nervous to be running a whole business on one machine. So just having one machine that is sort of creating all the value that we're shipping to customers makes me a little nervous, and we will need the capacity of another machine pretty soon, I suspect. So that's kind of what's driving it. And then so that's the short term, is just more capacity. And so kind of like what lands on our shop floor and starts making parts the quickest, to me feels like nearly replicating what we're doing already, rather than like, okay, we're going to get a robot and load a small S500 or something like that, which is basically a very small version of what we're running now. And because of the robot, you could be loading in a huge amount of stock. Long term, I kind of want to be bar feeding. So that looks like bar feeding an auto saw with a robot next to it into a machine, or it looks like just bar feeding a CNC. Yeah. The only brother machines that you can bar feed are the R machines at the moment. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but easily, very easily. And so I feel like the R machine gets me, like, no matter what direction I go long term. Robot feeding an R machine would be like living the high life. Because it lets you, when you're loading one table, the mill is running on the other table. The spindle is running on the other table. So that's kind of the thinking. The difference between the R650 and the R450 for me, because I'm doing really small parts, I think comes down to the 450 is a lot less space in the shop, which is nice. And the upside of the 650, I think short term, is that I can put a lot of stock on one table, and so I can run much longer run times right off the bat. Overnight runs being the goal there. Yeah. And so, and then longer term, what do you think about running part families? So instead of running one part for a long time, I'd run two parts. Yeah. I like it. I think, like we've discussed, there's some potential pitfalls, but I think they're not. I think they're pretty easily solvable. The main one being scrap rates not being equivalent potentially, but so you'd need to have a secondary process in place to rebalance, right? Or your process would need to be balanceable always. So, and one thing Andrew Henry raised was the difficulty potentially of getting one part to run overnight might be then getting 3 parts to run smoothly overnight.
What do you think that's? I just at first glance that makes a lot of sense, but do you think that's realistic?
I don't know. And then the other question is, depending on your time frame for achieving balanced production between all the parts that belong to an assembly, I could also theoretically just run an R450 through the night on one part, and then the next day I'm running the other parts, right? So I just put my longest runtime item overnight, and then during the day I run the other parts. Like, I think
this comes back to the sequential standard sequence of production.
Yeah, standard
concept.
sequence, SMED changeovers, because running a family of parts, that's 3 jaw sets onto 3 different vices.
Well, that happens regardless.
Yeah, it's just all at once. So you're not doing it's going to be if you're running macros that tell it how much of each part to do, would be pretty simple, but you're editing a program, it becomes non-standard more quickly. Right? Like right now we have a very standard workflow. We need a tray of parts, we need a vise, we need vice jaws, we need gripper fingers. And I think what you're saying is you're basically doing that but times 3, right? You're doing the same thing but 3 times.
Yeah, or just it can still be a tray of parts. It's just a tray that has 3 different stock sizes on it, and it's still a tray of gripper fingers and jaws. It's just a few more of each. So I'm just pushing back a little bit. I don't think it's fundamentally any different. It's just a little...
Right. And do you think I could run... If I cut the soft jaws on vice number 2 on a trunnion, do you think I could run them successfully on vice number 1?
There's a lot of variables that influence that, but but yes, I do think so.
Theoretically or realistically?
Realistically. Well, depending also on what your tolerances are. But I think, especially considering that you design your own parts, and could design around those potential mismatches, I think they would mostly be aesthetic issues that that you'd be running into. I don't, and if you made your tooling well, I don't think that would be a problem for the parts that you do.
Yeah, interesting.
I don't think that's true of everything for everyone, obviously.
Right. And I'm not sure.
That being said, there's systems that are built to do that.
Just probe it and adjust your offsets, or
palette, quick change,
0 point stuff?
0 point systems that will absolutely reliably repeat. So assuming,
assuming the trunnion is set up well on the machine and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's coming back to actual kinematic,
right?
Physical constraints.
Does it move the same over here as over there?
Yeah. So not to trivialize that, because our trunnions are not perfect. I think we have a few thou of displacement from one end to the other, through its travel in different positions.
Right.
So there's some parts where if we are repeating in a different position, that would, you might see it. Right. Or there's some parts where it might scrap apart, but we're not usually doing those that way.
Interesting.
But also that's an easy thing to standardize.
Yeah, I know. I'm not sure why I'd need to. I was just sort of thinking about potential downfalls.
Yeah.
And then lastly, it's going to the R650. I modeled up our shop. It's kind of comical.
The shop will be inside the machine.
Yeah, you open the sheet metal to walk over to it's doable. It's tight.
Yeah.
And then I could sort of make the case of buy the machine that works. You could sort of talk both ways, right? Buy the machine that makes sense now, make good parts, ship good parts. You're going to be buying another machine, then buy a different machine then.
I feel like that's the argument you would give to me.
Yeah. But then you sort of said the other day that now that you've moved, it's frustrating that you bought parts that fit your old shop, essentially.
Bought machines that fit my old shop?
Yeah.
Yeah. That being said, we wouldn't be where we are.
Right.
So it's sort of a moot point. But
yeah, so how annoying should the shop be before it's you know what, we're just going to get a 450 for now, and it's going to be a huge... it's going to be great either way.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think you probably would reorient the shop around it. Well, actually, I haven't seen the model and
Oh
seen
yeah,
how
yeah.
tight
No,
it is.
both
but-
require a total redo of the shop. It's just that the 650 does not leave much room around it for like I was like, where are we going to keep
walking?
No, we can walk around it like with 30-inch aisles. But then I'm kind of like, where are we setting up tools? Where are we keeping trays of stock that are going to be run? Where are we keeping all of the vice jaw and tray setups? And like there is room. Anyway, I don't know if you have any wisdom.
I think without seeing much more information, not really.
Yeah.
I suspect, I don't know.
Oh, and one thing that I thought was of interest from a lean concepts perspective is I was kind of thinking like single piece flow is the dream.
Sure.
Which sort of suggests like doing one at a time. And so doing a family of parts, bless you, from one standpoint is you have more whip. But on the other perspective would be you're actually achieving, from a systems perspective, you're achieving single piece flow on the assembly more closely because you're balancing production across all parts. So I think it's better. And that machine has a slower tool change time. But then you would be reducing tool changes because you could use those tools across 3 parts, which is kind of cool.
Maybe.
Certainly maybe.
Not if you were being able to have variable balanced production, because it would all be one part program at that point.
I see what you're saying. Right. I wonder if there's a way to do that. I mean, there is a way. I wonder if it's worthwhile.
I mean, yes.
Right. So you could have a standard production program that does leverage that, and then you could have one that's more flexible and less optimized
for makeup
in a classic twist.
My suspicion is that the 450 will be the way unless you're making a strong commitment to move soon.
Right. Yeah, which I probably am, but I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Or build some walls.
Walls for what?
To make your shop bigger.
Oh, yeah. Do a little expansion, a land grab.
Yeah. Exactly.
My landlord probably won't mind.
No.
Awesome. Well, probably a good place to wrap.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, once again. And as always, we enjoy this very much and enjoy getting to interact with you all and share our crazy, wacky ideas.
Yeah, those emails were really fun to read.
Yeah.
If you guys want to send us emails, even unprompted, which some of you already do, and we really appreciate it. It's really fun to continue the conversation and hear from people who have much more experience in a lot of different areas.
Absolutely.
We do have a Patreon, as we keep mentioning. Please check it out. If you get value from this podcast, you can find me at austere_manufacturing on Instagram and austeremanufacturing.com or austeremfg.com. Both go to the same place.
And you can find me at lichen_mfg on Instagram, lichenprecision.com on the internet, and the pod at incrementalci on Instagram.
And fixsomethingtoday at gmail.com.
Yeah, that one. And we will talk to you soon.